Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel. Am Yitzhak Hashem. Today we will be learning Daf Kuf Nun Zayin Amud Aleph. Yitzhak Hashem, we will be completing Siman Shin Chaf Daled and beginning Siman Shin Chaf Hey. Our learning should be a schus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael Hanesuna Batzar Ubashivya Haim Debein Bayom Bein Bayabasha Hamakim Yerachem Alehem V'Yitziem Yitzara L'Rfacha Me'afel L'Oira Mishibed L'Geula Hashta Bagol of Zman Kariv and Emar Amen. Our learning should be a schus Refuah Shalema for Yeshua Levi ben Ahuva Malkachana, Yitzchak ben Tzion ben Dusha, Rivka bas Shiraleach, Havadasa bas Serol. They should have a refuah shalema, Pesach Shar Chel Yisrael. In the schus of the limud Torah of Klal Yisrael, the Rebbeinu Shalom should watch over every member of Klal Yisrael, B'chol Makom Shehem. So we begin today on the bottom line of Kuf Nun Vav Amud Beis in the Shulchan Aruch, Siman Shin Chav Daled, Sif Tes Vav, continuing to learn the halachas that govern the feeding of livestock on Shabbos. Says the Bechaber, Aser ligroif ha'evus. You're not allowed to sweep out either the feeding pen or the feeding trough. We'll describe the difference in a moment. Also, ligroif ha'evus, you're not allowed to sweep out the evus, lifnei shar shel pitam, from before an ox that is being fattened. And this is lav dafka. It doesn't mean that it has to be a shar shel pitam. What it means is you have a feeding pen or a feeding trough for a livestock. You're not allowed to sweep it out on Shabbos, and this refers, says the Mechaber, even to afilu evus shel kli, even if it's a freestanding feeding trough, so that it's actually a keli. It's either a metal keli or a wooden keli, but even if it's some kind of keli, you're not allowed to sweep it up. Gzeira atu shel karka, this is a gzeira atu, sweeping out a feeding pen, which is just a fenced-in area where the foodstuffs, where the fodder is just dumped out onto the ground. Now, to sweep out a feeding pen where the animal feed is actually on the ground, that's a real problem on Shabbos. That's a real problem of Issa Malacha, the Asi La Shvuye Gumois. Because if you sweep out the earthen surface of a feeding pen, then you're going to come up against the Isser of Ashvuye Gumois. By sweeping out the ground, you're going to level the ground. You're going to fill in little holes and little ditches and indentations in the ground. And since you're doing this, depends. If you're doing it out in the field, it would be a telada of the malacha of chayrish, of plowing. If it's more of a structure, then it would be a telada of the isser of boina. But again, if you're talking about a feeding pen where the animal fodder is laying on the ground and you want to sweep out the earthen surface at the bottom of the feeding pen, that would be a real problem of ashvuye gumais. Since that's usher, they also made usher sweeping out a feeding trough, even if it's a freestanding keli and the bottom of it is not earthen, even if it's a wooden box or it's a metal vat. You can't go ahead and sweep out the bottom. That's xera, because you might come to do it to the earthen floor of a feeding pen, which would be the problem of ashvuye gumais. Another isser that you have over here is that you're not allowed, when you have the animal and the animal is trying to eat inside this feeding pen or inside this trough, sometimes the animal gets into the fodder, so that the animal actually steps into where all the food is. That becomes a problem, because once the animal gets into the food, he's trampling the food with his dirty feet. Sometimes they might also drop excrement on the feed. I remember having this problem actually in a much smaller level with chickens. There was a period in time where we had backyard chickens, and sometimes the chickens, they're all tripping over themselves to get to the food. So especially when they're little chicks, sometimes the little chicks will jump up onto the feed box, and now they actually get into the feed. When they get into the feed, it becomes a problem. They drop excrement into the feed, they make the feed dirty, so you want to keep the animal away from the feed. Sometimes when you would have this feeding trough, you would want to push away some of the food so that the animal doesn't get into all the food and make the food dirty. Says the Mechaber, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to clear away the food from in front of the animal, and in the Mishnah Berurah we will see why. Says the Mishnah Berurah at the very bottom of Kuf Nun Vav Amid Beis, Mishnah Berurah is cut in Lamed Tes. Ligraif ha'evos. You're not allowed to sweep out the feeding pen or the feeding trough. Shegarfin oisa. You want to sweep it out. Shelo yisarev ha'afruris shebe'evos bateven ubasa'orim. You don't want pebbles and dirt to get mixed in to the straw, the barley, the animal food, shenoistim lefanov, that you're putting in front of the animal, v'yokutz b'ma'acholoi. A very practical problem. You have this feeding pen or you have this feeding trough. Over time, dirt, afruris, pebbles, dirt gets into the trough. What you want to do is you want to clean out the trough and you want to put in fresh food, but you're not interested in putting in food into the trough when there is afruris in the trough that's going to get mixed into the food, and then the animal won't want to eat it. So you want to sweep it out. You're not allowed to do this. If there's an earthen floor, you come up against the isser of ashvuye gumais, filling in holes and leveling out the earthen floor. Hainu desham regilusu shemechavein la'ashvuye. When you have an earthen floor and you sweep it out, you do not only intend to just sweep out the dirt, you also want to level out the earthen surface of the bottom of the feed pen. You're not interested in losing barley. You want all the barley that you put into the feed pen to end up in the mouth of the animal. So you don't want your feed pen to have little ditches and little holes in the bottom. You're just going to lose grain. You're going to lose barley into those holes, and it's never going to find its way to the animal's mouth. So you're actually mechavein when you sweep out the earthen floor of the feed pen to do ashvuye gumais. And therefore, gazrin and grifa afilu be'evet shebekli. And this is why we make a gzera, even if you're using a freestanding keli that does not have an earthen surface at the bottom, we make a gzera, because if you would do it by the earthen feed pen, it would be an issa daraisa. You're doing it, it's mechavin. It's not even a davar she'eino miskaven. So that would be an issa daraisa. Therefore, we make a gzera by a keli. You can't do it by a keli midrabanan. But if you have some kind of a crate on Shabbos inside your house, you're allowed to clean out the bottom of a crate, because what would we making a gzera? By the feeding trough, we can make a gzera. You have a freestanding feeding trough with a metal or a wooden bottom. Really, it shouldn't be usher, but we make it also b'derabbanan, because if you sweep out that, you might sweep out the feeding pen with an earthen bottom. What kind of gzera are we going to make by a crate inside your house? You don't have crates with an earthen bottom, so there's no room for a gzera. Ois cut mem aleph. The Mechaber said you're not allowed to be misalik to teven. You're not allowed to push away the straw and the fodder that's in front of the animal in the feeding trough or the feeding pen. Explains the Mishnah Berurah, Kishuhu Rav, when you have a lot of food piled up over there, sometimes you want to push some of it away, so that the ox doesn't get into the food and make it dirty with excrement. Now, why is this aser? It's also mishum de bevada yesh ba ma shenimas kfar b'mitras raglav v'loy chazi l'tiltul. Over here, we're not dealing with the problem of ashvuye gumais. Over here, we're not talking about doing anything to the bottom surface of the feeding pen or the feeding trough. We're talking about moving the food. What could be wrong with feeding the food, with moving the food? Explains the Chavetz Chaim. The problem is, again, why are you moving the food? You're moving the food lest the animal make it dirty. Well, this problem already exists. The animal probably already made some of the food dirty. The food that's dirty is now considered muktzah, because if the animal's not going to eat it, it's no longer royal achila for the animal, so then what is it? It's muktzah machmas gufay, and therefore you wouldn't be allowed to move it, and that's why you're not allowed to be misalik this teven. That brings us to the end of Siman Shin Chaf Daled. Now we turn to Siman Shin Chaf Hey. Wow, it's kind of amazing. What a journey, right? I mean, take a look at this. We started Chelik Gimel over here with what? Siman Shin Mem? The Reish Mem, I mean. We started with Reish Mem Beis. And here we are on Daf Kuf Nun Zayin Amud Aleph in Siman Shin Chaf Hey. Wow. Okay. Siman Shin Chaf Hey. Eina Yehudi she'asa malacha ba'ad Yisrael. What happens when an Eina Yehudi is doing malacha for a Yisrael, Ubay Tes Zayin Seifim, and here we have 16 Seifim. We're going to start with Sif Aleph, not exactly a case where Eina Yehudi is doing malacha for a Yehudi, but the Mechaber Kedarka B'Kodesh, he starts in one place on that topic, and soon we're going to get into the topic of the heading of the Siman. Says the Mechaber Sif Aleph, Mutter lezamein Eina Yehudi b'Shabbos. You're allowed to invite an Eina Yehudi to come over to you on Shabbos, ostensibly to give him food. So you're allowed to invite an Eina Yehudi to come, and you're going to give him food. Okay, that's mutter on Shabbos. Well, why would we think that it should be also on Shabbos? What Isser is there here? So let's take a look right away at the Mishnah Berurah's Katan Aleph. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Lezamin Eina Yehudi b'Shabbos, you're allowed to invite an Eina Yehudi b'Shabbos. After b'Yom Tov, also Lezamin Eina Yehudi lechel imay. On Yom Tov, you're not allowed to invite an Eina Yehudi to eat with you. Why? Gzeira shemi yarba lavashel b'shvilai. On Yom Tov, you're allowed to cook. Now, on Yom Tov, you're allowed to cook for you. You're allowed to cook for Yisraelim. You're allowed to cook for Yiddish guests that you might want to invite to your house. But you're not allowed to cook for an Eina Yehudi on Shabbos. The problem is, if we're going to allow you to invite an Eina Yehudi on Shabbos, you might decide, oh, I better add a few more potatoes to the stew. Now you're cooking those potatoes for an Eina Yehudi. You're not allowed to cook for an Eina Yehudi on Shabbos. So on Yom Tov, I'm sorry. So on Yom Tov, you're not allowed to invite an Eina Yehudi. But on Shabbos, you are allowed to invite an Eina Yehudi because you're not cooking on Shabbos. You're not allowed to cook on Shabbos. So, said the Mishnah Berurah, after B'Yom Tov Asal Lezamin Eina Yehudi lechel imay, Gzeira Shemi Yarba Lavashel b'Shvilai, because you might come to cook specifically. You might come to add to your food and cook more for the Eina Yehudi, which would be aser. Kilakama Siman Tafkuf Yud Beis, B'Shabbos Day Lochush Lazeh, but on Shabbos when you're not allowed to cook anyway, so there's no room for a chashash, shari. So that's the first halacha that we have over here in Siman Shin Chaf. Hey, said the Mechaber, Mutter lezamein Eina Yehudi b'Shabbos. You're allowed to invite an Eina Yehudi on Shabbos to come eat by you because you're allowed to give him food. Okay, says the Mechaber weiter, halacha number 2, Mutter litein mezainos lefanov. You're allowed to put food in front of him. So you're allowed to give him food. But let's be very medayik in the Lashon of the Mechaber. You're not handing the food to him. You're not putting it in his hands. You're putting the food in front of him. Okay, so first things first. Says the Mishnah Berurah's Katan Beis, Mutter litein. You're allowed to give food to the Eina Yehudi. Now again, the Mechaber said you're allowed to put it in front of him. But you're giving him food. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Now there's a chiddush here too. Let's remember what we just learned in Siman Shin Chaf Daled. In Siman Shin Chaf Daled, we learned about all sorts of things that you're not allowed to do when it comes to feeding an animal because it's an Isser of Tircha Yisera. And we learned about animals that you're not allowed to feed. So you're not allowed to feed the birds that you have in your dovecote. Why? Because they could go get their own food. So it's ein mezainos alecha. It's not your obligation. They don't need you for their food. So then for you to give them food is a tercha yisera. So wait a second. Why are we allowed to give food to an Eina Yehudi? Let the Eina Yehudi go get his own food. Why isn't it tercha yisera to give an Eina Yehudi food? Says the Mishnah Berurah's Katan Beis, after asal l'trayach b'Shabbos b'shvil mi she'ein mezainos alav, even though you're not allowed to do a tercha yisera on Shabbos, you're not allowed to do any tercha to feed somebody or something that doesn't need you to provide its food. K'dela'el b'siman shin chav daled sev aleph, Eina Yehudi chashiv mezainos alav. On Eina Yehudi, there is a certain aspect of mezainos alecha. You do carry a certain level of obligation to provide food for another human being, even for an Eina Yehudi. Le'inyan shemutar l'trayach b'shvilai, and therefore you're allowed to be matriach for him. Why? Mishum demefarnes in aniyei einam Yehudim im aniyei Yisrael mipnei darkei shalom. The halacha is, if you had aniyei Yisrael, if you had poor Yidden that you had to feed on Shabbos, there's no shaila. You're definitely allowed to be matriach to provide food for Aniyei Yisrael. Now, what happens if you have your soup kitchen over there and you're feeding Aniyei Yisrael, and now Tony the Eina Yehudi comes in? Are you going to say that you're not allowed to give Tony the Eina Yehudi food on Shabbos because it's a Tercha Yisera? No, you're allowed to give him food. Why are you allowed to give him food? Says the Mishnah Berurah, the Darkei Shalom. It's certainly an Indian of Darkei Shalom. We have to keep the peace, right? So you're allowed to give him food. So you see that there is at least one instance over here where an Eina Yehudi is considered Mizainoisan Olav. That's enough to be matir that even lechatchila, you're allowed to be mezamin and Eina Yehudi, and you're allowed to give him food on Shabbos, and it is not considered a tercha yisera. Now let's go back into the Mechaber. So the Mechaber said, halacha number 1, mutal mezamin Eina Yehudi b'Shabbos. Halacha number 2, mutal litein mezaynoisav lefanav. You're allowed to give him food. Now the Mechaber kind of qualifies it, and he says you're allowed to give him food bechotzer, if he is in your chotzer. Now, what's the significance of that? Well, your chotzer is a rishus hayachid, right? Let's go back to the times of the Mishnah and the Gemara. You had a house. Your house opened up onto a chotzer. It opened up onto a courtyard. The courtyard really was an integral part of the habitation. You used the chotzer. That's where they cooked. That's where they did their laundry. They did a lot of tzarchei habayis were done in the chotzer. The chotzer was typically surrounded by a wall. So the chotzer is a rishus hayachid. So now, the Mechaber is telling you, you're allowed to put food in front of the Eina Yehudi bechotzer if he is located in the chotzer la'achlan. And you're giving him food with the intent that he should eat it. Now, what's the significance here? So, you might have picked up on this already. The problem, the potential issue that we're coming up against over here is an issue of haitzah. We know that you're not allowed to do what we colloquially know as carrying on Shabbos. This are of haitzah, you're not allowed to transfer something from one rishus to another rishus. So to pick up something in rishus hayachid, to make an akira, to uproot something in rishus hayachid, and then be moitzi it to rishus harabim, take it out to rishus harabim, and then make a hanacha, put it down in Rishus Harabim. So you uprooted something in Rishus Hayachid, you transferred it to Rishus Harabim, and you put it down in Rishus Harabim. That would be an Issa Daraisa. That's an Issa Daraisa of Hitzah. Now, how about if you only do part of the malacha? Let's say you pick up something in Rishus Hayachid. So you did step 1 of the malacha of Hitzah. You picked up something in Rishus Hayachid. And now you went ahead and you gave it to somebody in Rishus HaYachid who took it out to Rishus Harabim and put it down in Rishus Harabim. So now the entire malacha was done through the two of you. You made an akira in Rishus HaYachid. The next person took it out to Rishus Harabim and put it down in Rishus Harabim. So you did part of the malacha, he did part of the malacha. That is an Issa D'Rabbanan. That's what we're concerned with over here. Over here, you are picking up food. You're taking food in a chotzer. So you had food sitting on the table. You picked it up in Rishus HaYachid. You made an akira. Now you're giving it to the Eina Yehudi. Now what if the Eina Yehudi takes it and takes it out to Rishus Harabim? Well, in that case, we may look at this and say, you did part of the malacha of Haitzah, and the Eina Yehudi finished the malacha of Haitzah. But you did part of it. Maybe there's a problem here of Haitzah. That's what we're up against over here. We're also up against an issue of Marasayin. What's the issue of Marasayin? Well, you would not be allowed to pick up something in Rishus HaYachid, hand it to an Eina Yehudi, and instruct the Eina Yehudi to go take it out of the Rishus HaYachid to the Rishus Harabim and put it down. That would be an Isser of Amir La'akim on an Isser Daraisa of Haitzah. So the two problems that we're up against over here is a problem of the Malacha of Haitzah, that maybe you, the Yisrael, are doing part of the malacha of Eitzah, and the Eina Yehudi is completing it, in which case you are over on an Issa D'Rabbanan. There's also the problem of Marasayan, that if you hand something to an Eina Yehudi when he's in the chotzer and he takes it out of the chotzer to Rishus Harabim, it may look like he's doing it at your behest. And that would be an Issa of Marasayan. People would think that you're doing Amir La'akim on an Issa D'Raisa of Haitzah. That's what we're up against. So says the Mechaber, you're allowed to give him the food bechotzer when he's in the chotzer li'achlan with the intent that he should eat that food in the chotzer. V'im nitolan v'yatza, if he now takes the food and he goes out to Rishus Harabim, ein niskakin loy, you're not responsible for that. You're not over in Issa D'Rabbanan. We do not say that you did part of the malacha of Haitzah, he completed it, and therefore you are over on Issa D'Rabbanan. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. It says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in Gimel, lefanav b'chotzer. You're allowed to put food in front of him inside the chotzer. First of all, says the Mishnah Berurah, kasra paiskim, the paiskim right, the dafka litain lefanav. The mechaber was being very meduyik, say some of the paiskim. You're allowed to take food and put it in front of him. So the Ein Yehudi is sitting in your chotzer by a picnic table. You could take food and you could put it on a plate and you could put it in front of him in the chotzer with the intention that he should sit down and he should eat it. V'hu yikachem ba'atzmai, and he's going to pick it up on his own. Shari, that's when it's mutter. Avaliten liyadai, but to take food, to take, a nice portion of chopped liver and challah and egg salad and hand it to him in his hands inside the chotzer, aser, that's aser. Why? Because now you do have a problem of the malacha of Hitzah. Shema yoytzi l'Rishus Harabim, maybe now the Ein Yehudi will go out to Rishus Harabim, v'nimtza l'mafreya, and now retroactively it will come out to HaYisrael asa ha'akira me'Rishus HaYachid, the aser will come on b'simin shin mem zayin. What the Mishnah Berurah is saying in the name of the Paiskim is like this. He's saying, let's do the math. If the Ein Yehudi is inside your chotzer, which is a Rishus HaYachid, and you pick up a plate with egg salad and chopped liver and crackers, and you hand it to him, you just made an akira. You picked up the plate with the chopped liver and the egg salad and the crackers. You picked it up in Rishus HaYachid, so you made an akira in Rishus HaYachid. You handed it to the Ein Yehudi. The Ein Yehudi takes it out to the Rishus Harabim and puts it down. Over there, you did one part of the malacha of Haitzah. You did the akira. Since you did the akira and the entire malacha of Haitzah ended up taking place, you did the akira, he was moitzi it to Rishus Harabim and put it down, it comes out l'mafreya that you were over in Issa D'Rabbanan. So these paiskim say that when the mechaber said that you're allowed to put food in front of, mutar litein lefanav, you're allowed to put food in front of the Ein Yehudi in the chotzer, the mechaber was being very meduyik. He was being very precise. Yeah, you could take the plate with the chopped liver and the egg salad and the crackers, you could put it in front of the Ein Yehudi on the picnic table. Now, if he picks it up, he made the akira. He goes out to Rishus Harabim. He was mitzi it to Rishus Harabim. He puts it down in Rishus Harabim. He made the hanach in Rishus Harabim. You had nothing to do with the malacha of Haitzah. But if you pick it up and hand it to him, then you made the akira. When he goes out to Rishus Harabim, makes a hanacha, you're on the hook for the first part of that malacha, and it would be an Issa D'Rabbanan. So say some poskim. Now, says the Mishnah Berurah, however, Vadas El Yerabah, the opinion of the El Yerabah is, the mutter lite layaf biyadai kishu b'chatzer. You're allowed to give it even into his hands. Why? Because the El Yerabah says, let's dig a little bit deeper into the math. First of all, you didn't give it to him with the intent that he should take it out. You handed him, he's here to eat. You handed him a single serving, which ostensibly he's going to eat right now. Anybody who's watching this, nobody is going to be chayshid that you gave it to him in order for him to take it out to Rishus Harabim. So a marasayin problem there isn't, right? No one's going to think, oh, look at that. Tony is taking the chopped liver, the egg salad, and the crackers out to Rishus Harabim because the yid told him to. No, he invited the guy here to eat. He gave him a portion. So marasayin there isn't, right? Then, says the El Yerabah, T'keven de Ein Yehudi oimid bifnim. If the Ein Yehudi is standing in one place in the chotzer, when you hand him the plate, usually when you hand somebody a plate, a serving of food, you don't do it while he's walking. The fellow is standing there, you're schmoozing with him, you take a plate, you hand it to him. Well, in that case, says the El Yerabah, who made the akira? Kishayoitzi lechutz, if Tony then starts walking and takes the serving outside to Rishus Harabim, chashiv oise ba'atzmai ha'akira. You didn't make the akira. Now we're going to get more into this. B'Yirtzeh Hashem, B'Ezras Hashem Yisbarach. We'll get to Siman Shin Mem Zayin. We'll start learning the halachas of HaTorah. We'll get into the nitty gritty. But high level, let me explain this to you. What the Eliyah Rabbah is saying is like this. The concern of the Paiskim brought down by the Mishnah Berurah was that you're going to end up doing part of the malacha of HaTorah. Which part? The Akira. Okay, the thinking goes like this. There's a serving of food on the table in the chutzner. When you pick it up, you made the Akira. You hand it to the Ein Yehudi. The Ein Yehudi takes it out. He's being moitziet. He puts it down. He makes the hanacha. You're on the hook for the Akira. That's the thinking. Says the Eliyah Rabbah, dig a little bit deeper. If you take the serving of food and you hand it to the Ein Yehudi while the Ein Yehudi is standing still in the chutzner, that's not called that you made an Akira. The same way the serving of food was at rest when it was sitting on the picnic table, it's also at rest when it's in the hand of the Ein Yehudi who's standing still in the chutzner. So you did not make an Akira. You picked it up in Rishos HaYachid and you put it back down in Rishos HaYachid. When you put it into Tony's hand and Tony is standing still, that means that serving of food is now standing still once again in the Rishos HaYachid. When Tony the Ein Yehudi starts walking, he made the Akira. And if he takes it out to Rishos HaRabim, he made the Akira in Rishos HaYachid, he was moitzi to Rishos HaRabim, and he put it down in Rishos HaRabim. So says the Eliyah Rabbah, I don't know what these poskim are worried about. If you're handing the serving of food to Tony when he's standing still in Rishos HaYachid, then you didn't make the Akira in Rishos HaYachid. You're not on the hook for that Rishos HaYachid. And therefore, says the Eliyah Rabbah, he doesn't have any problem with handing a serving of food to an Ein Yehudi in the chutzner, even in his hands. Marasayan, there isn't. Because you're handing him a single serving of food with the intent that he should eat it over there in Rishos HaYachid. No one watching this happen is going to think otherwise. So Marasayan, there isn't. You're going to be on the hook for the Akira? No, you're not going to be on the hook for the Akira because you gave it to the Ein Yehudi when he was standing still. V'yesh lahakal bazeh, therefore says the Chavetz Chaim, you could be mekel kidvarav, like the opinion of the Eliyah Rabbah, u'kamoisha kasavdu b'bir halacha. V'yema Yisrael eina moisa liyadai, ela ha'eina Yehudi loikech miyada Yisrael. And certainly, if you don't actually take the serving of food and give it to the Ein Yehudi, instead you're holding a tray, and the Ein Yehudi comes and he takes some hors d'oeuvres off of the tray, l'kuli alma mutter. That's certainly mutter according to everybody. As long as he's taking it with the thinking being that he's going to eat it in the chutzner, so there's no marasayin. In that case, there's no tzad to say that the Yid made the Akira. The Yid didn't make the Akira. The Ein Yehudi took it from the Yisrael. He made the Akira. Ois Katan Dalid, the Mechaber said that you're allowed to give food to the Ein Yehudi in the chutzner, le'achlon, with the intent being that the Ein Yehudi is going to eat it in the chutzner. Says the Mishnah Berurah, what does this mean that you gave it to him to eat? Does it mean that you have to tell Tony, I'm giving you this food right now so that you should eat it here in the chutzner? Do you have to instruct him, make sure you eat it in the chutzner? Says the Chavetz Chaim, no. Even if you don't spell out to Tony that he has to eat it in the chutzner, gam ken shari, this is still mutter. Because that's the default position. You invited him over, there's food being served, you're giving him a serving of food, he's going to eat it now. There's no expectation that he's going to leave with it. You're not giving him a doggy bag. We're coming to contrast. Let's say the Ein Yehudi knows that he can't eat it here. You are giving him a doggy bag, right? You're giving it to him, don't eat it here. Take it with you. Well, in that case, that means that basically you gave it to him with the understanding that he should take it out. Then that will be also because of Marasayan. Because people will say, now you're going to have the problem that onlookers are going to think that you're being over on Amir La'akum on the Isser of HaTorah. It looks like you're instructing Tony, here, take this package out to Rishos HaRabim for me, which would be also, he brings this from the Magen Avram, B'Shem Shilti Gibarim, V'cheinu Ba'ar Zeruah. Okay, let's go weiter in the Mechaber. So the second line into Siman Shin Chafei, in the middle of the line, says the Mechaber, V'dafka sha'ena Yehudi b'chotzer. But you're only allowed to give food to the Ein Yehudi if the Ein Yehudi is inside the Rishus HaYachid, if he's inside the Chotzer. Aval im oimid b'chutz. But let's say the Ein Yehudi is outside the Chotzer. The Ein Yehudi is actually standing in Rishus HaRabim. Upashat yodoi lifnim. And he stretches out his hand from the Rishus HaRabim into the Chotzer. So now, the Ein Yehudi is standing in Rishus HaRabim. You are standing in the Chotzer in Rishus HaYachid. The Ein Yehudi stretches his hand into the Rishus HaYachid. Are you allowed to put something in his hand? No. So, now, if you take something and you put it into Tony's hand, you know he's going to take it out to Rishus HaRabim. That's usher. Or to give Tony something other than food. Let's say Tony is standing in the Chotzer, but you're not giving him chopped liver and crackers. You're giving him something else, shederech lahaitzi, which you know he's going to take home with him. You're giving him a gift. You're giving him a box of chocolates. You're not giving him a box of chocolates so he should eat it here. You're giving, I have a gift for you. You're giving him a box of chocolates. You know he's going to take it home with him. To hand him something that the understanding is he's going to take it with him, that you can't give him even if he's standing inside the Chotzer. Says the Mishnah Berurah, if the Ein Yehudi is standing out in the Rishus HaRabim and he sticks his hand into the Rishus HaYachid, you can't give him anything. In that case, even if you don't actually take something and put it into the Ein Yehudi's outstretched hand, the Ein Yehudi sticks his hand into the Rishus HaYachid and takes something from you, the Ein Oisai Yisrael Shum Akira, so that you didn't make the Akira. The guy made the Akira. He stuck his hand from the Rishus HaRabim into the Rishus HaYachid. You're standing in the Rishus HaYachid like this. The Ein Yehudi sticks his hand from the Rishus HaRabim into the Rishus HaYachid, takes it and brings it out. When he took it out of your hand, he made the Akira. So in this case, you have no shaykhis to the Malach of Haitzah. You didn't make an Akira, you didn't do anything. It's still also, says the Mishnah Berurah, the Kevin Sheyadua Sheyotziyenu, because since it's very clear that the Ein Yehudi is going to take whatever he's taking from you and take it out to the Rishus HaRabim, this is Marasayin 101. It looks very much like the Ein Yehudi is transferring something from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim at your behest. The Cholshkein Limsar Liyadai, certainly to take something and put it in his hand, the Asa Mishum HaAkira, that would be also because then you taka made the Akira. Then you did part one of the Malacha of Haitzah. Ugedlakaman b'simin shin mem zayin. You're also not allowed to give him any other kind of chayfetz, even if Tony is standing in the chotzer. Yes, you could give him a single serving of chopped liver, egg salad, and crackers with the intent that he's going to eat it over there in the chotzer. That is no problem. But to give him a 6-pack of beer to take home with him, that you can't do. Even not to hand it to him. Even to take a 6-pack of beer, put it down on the picnic table in front of him. Here, Tony, with the understanding that he's going to pick it up and take it home. That's usher. You know he's going to take it out to Rishus HaRabim. Usher. The Yomru, because people are going to say the Bishlichusai Maitzi, that he did it at your behest. The Chanal, Besif Cotton Dalid. Okay, we're going to stop over here. We'll continue next time. Thank you so much for joining me for Limud HaTorah. This list of Limud HaTorah should be making against Klal Yisrael. The Rabban Shem should send Yeshua, Sefuris, Parnas, and Sheduchim Tolos in need. We should be Zoichet to see the Biaska El Tzedek. B'mher v'yameinu amen. Be well.